Hi, my name is Adam Eckerly. I'm a Senior Technical Marketing Architect with the Cloud Platform Business Unit at VMware.
My name is Ahmad Yunus. I'm a Senior Technical Marketing Engineer, also in the Cloud Platform Business Unit here at VMware. And today, in this video, we're going to discuss the vCenter Server and Platform Services Controller, or PSC, 6.5 architecture. We're going to cover the Platform Services Controller, what's actually being replicated.
Common question.
Exactly. We're also going to talk about multi-master, and what does that really mean? SSO sites. We're going to kind of discuss what is going on with these sites and what they really mean as well. And then finally, we're going to talk about some scenarios and examples when it comes to this topology and the PSC and how it all fits together. So let's get started.
Okay. So the first thing, we're going to talk about what's actually being replicated, right? So we've kind of pre-populated some words here at the top, and we'll go through them. But the first thing is SSO, or single sign-on, which comprises basically of identity sources. So the PSC handles authentication for vCenter Server, right? So we have to be able to configure some sort of authentication resource that we can authenticate against.
Is that why when I log in and I look at my browser, it flips from vCenter to the PSC, and then after it has that authentication piece, it flips back to vCenter?
That's exactly correct, Ahmad.
Okay.
So we have to proxy all the authentication through the Platform Services Controller. So SSO, or the SSO configuration, comprises of those identity sources, which could be Active Directory. We can authenticate to multiple Active Directories if we have it, AD over LDAP, and even Open LDAP types of.
Question there. You said we can use AD. Can I point it to a specific AD? Because that question comes up a lot.
Like a specific domain controller?
Sure.
Yeah, so if we do Active Directory over LDAP as our authentication source, we can give it a primary and a secondary specific domain controllers to authenticate towards.
Okay, that's really good to know.
Yeah, or we can join the PSCs to Active Directory, and we'll use the computer account to authenticate. So that way, it just uses the native Active Directory mechanisms to figure out where to authenticate towards.
Now, if I have multiple PSCs in an SSO domain, if I join one of them to Active Directory, does that get replicated? Will all of them join Active Directory?
Not automatically. So that's a very important point. I'm glad you brought it up. So when we join one PSC within the SSO domain to Active Directory, we should join all of them. So that's a process where I need to go to each PSC and actually join it to the Active Directory domain.
Okay, and that requires a reboot each time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But once we join those PSCs to the domain and we create an identity source for Active Directory, that configuration, we only do that once. It replicates across.
Gotcha.
So, and similar principle for tags and tag categories. So we create a tag one place, you can consume it other places. We'll talk more about that in a minute.
Sure.
Custom roles. So when we have, a good example of this is like a backup application, right? Usually they require some sort of permissions, and we can create a custom role just for that backup service account. So that is, we do that once and it replicates out. Global permissions. So this is a new construct in vSphere 6 and higher, where we can create a set of permissions at the top level, and that'll waterfall down to all of the vCenter servers within the SSO domain. And then last is licensing. So, license keys are always a pain, right? And so now we can put those license keys in one place at the SSO domain layer, and they replicate out to all the PSCs, and then we can consume them from any vCenter server. So just to kind of button this whole concept up, let's say that we each have our own vCenter servers. Okay. They're in the same SSO domain, right? That's kind of the secret sauce. And I'm gonna create some tags, and I want to assign those to some VMs. So I create those tags, I assign them to VMs that my vCenter server is managing, and then you can log into your vCenter, and those tags will show up for you as well. So you can consume those, assign those tags to your VMs.
Okay, and then if I wanted to create my own tags, I can do so as well, and they'll appear on your side. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. All right, so I think we've got the concept down of what is actually being replicated. Now, this replication has to have some sort of model where, there's a time what is the occurrence for this?
Yeah, all these things are replicated every 30 seconds.
Okay.
So we kind of call that a ripple replication, but it is multi-master. So one of the important things about this architecture is, unlike Active Directory, one of the few differences is that we can, the first PSC that we deploy in the environment, there's nothing special about it. So we can lose that PSC or any other PSC and it would be exactly the same. We don't have like a primary domain controller like what we would have in Active Directory. And we can kind of dig into that.
Yeah, I think we should. And you just kind of brought up multi-master. So that's a good segue into what is really multi-master, right?
Yep.
So let's draw our first PSC within our environment. And I think as we draw our first PSC here, we should also put it in a site.
Let's just, since we're out here at HQ, let's use some airport codes. People can relate to those. So we'll say San Francisco is our SFO is our first site.
Okay. Now, one thing that comes up a lot when we talk to customers is, look, I don't want to have multiple PSCs per site. I'm going to just deploy one. I think we should go through that scenario and show what's going to happen as we deploy one per site, and then talk about what will happen if, let's say, one fails.
Okay,
right?
That sounds great.
All right, so now that we have our first one, this is our first site. And again, as we talked about in a previous video, a site is a logical boundary and a way to group PSCs. So let's create a second PSC in a different site. I'll let you pick the site name again.
Okay. I'll give my home some love. We'll say it's IND for Indianapolis. Should we put some vCenter servers in here as well?
Yeah, we should. But before you do that, we should create the replication agreement, the bidirectional replication agreement that happens by default. There's nothing you need to do there.
Yep.
Right?
Because when we deploy this second PSC, right, we are telling it that we're joining an existing SSO domain. It asks us for another PSC that we're going to use to replicate with, and that's the PSC that will automatically form the replication agreement for you.
Right. The only difference here is we told it it's a new site because the first site was SFO. Now we got IND as a completely new site. So you can have different sites within the same SSO domain.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So now let's go ahead and add our vCenter servers. So we have, what are we going to do? One or two in each?
Let's go two here.
Okay.
Let's say just one over here.
Okay. So I almost feel like we should add another site. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's pretty common.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and add one. And let's say NYC. Used to live there, so why not?
Okay, so let's talk about this replication agreement briefly.
Sure.
So again, when you deploy your New York City PSC, you have a choice, right? The wizard asks you for a PSC to replicate with.
Sure.
Why did you choose Indiana in this case?
Well, we want to create as few replication agreements as possible. We also want to have a nice linear topology. And the reason for this is for performance reasons, right? The PSC is supposed to run nice and lean. But to be honest, sometimes this is hard to remember what PSC was, the last one I deployed to. So really, would there be an issue if every time I deployed to the first PSC? I mean, if I had another one here and just continuously deploy to SFO.
Yeah.
Is there an issue there?
That's pretty common. Well, let's explore that. So let's just draw out my first PSC here, PSC number 1.
Okay.
Let's deploy.
How about we do 5 PSCs?
Okay, sure, that works. 2.
Okay. 3, 4, and we have 5. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, and like Ahmad said, we're going to create an agreement back towards PSC number 1, right? We're just always going to choose number 1 during the install wizard.
See, isn't that easy?
Yeah, that's not too bad, but there's a problem with this. What if I lose PSC number 1?
Oh, wow. Well, if one goes down, no one can talk because
That's right.
everybody was talking to number 1.
We've got a lot of isolation going on.
You know what? I can fix that though.
Okay.
What if I do this, right? So now all of these guys can talk. Boom, done.
Yeah, more like a mesh. Yeah, so that will mitigate the issue of having that failed PSC because now you have additional paths to get the replication traffic out. But what if you want to add PSC number 6?
That's easy. Go ahead.
Okay. I'll add PSC number 6. Okay, now who am I going to replicate? Right, we always say we're going to do PSC number 1.
Well, PSC number 1 is down.
So so
we can't even
I
create
can't
that
create
agreement.
that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then who?
Well, I mean, you got 3, right?
New 4. Because it's a mesh, that means I need to make sure that all of the PSCs are replicating.
All right. You proved your point here. It's starting to become, it's becoming a management nightmare. And as we add more, the replication agreements keep growing and growing.
Yeah.
Hard to keep track of.
And these are all manual things that we have to do, right? It's not like Active Directory where there's some sort of service running that determines these replication agreements. Every time that I'm drawing a line, right, we're going in and having to manually create that agreement. So it just really is a ton of work to build and maintain this type of topology.
Is there a way for me to see these replication agreements? I mean, we talk about them, but how can I see what I have? Like if I wanted to see this today or that, which that's a bad thing again, what should I use?
Yeah, great question. So there's a command called VDC Rep Admin that we can use to not only view and monitor the replication agreements and the status of each of those agreements, but we can also use this command to create and destroy replication agreements.
Okay, so this is a tool you definitely want in your toolkit.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also read up about it. So we're going to put a link to the VMware knowledge base article down at the bottom of the screen so that you can read up all about the capabilities of VDC Rep Admin and be able to understand how to use it.
That's a great idea. Okay, so back to our scenario here. So we have, again, 3 sites, but what if, let's see, I'm going to draw another vCenter just so we complete our topology, but what if we have a failure?
Yeah, well, let's look at the Indianapolis PSC. I mean, it would never fail my PSC, but let's, for the sake of the whiteboard, let's assume that it does fail.
Okay.
Yeah, now we kind of have that same kind of isolation that we had before, right? Where the SFO and the New York City PSCs can't replicate with each other.
Right. So let's mitigate that, okay? We're going to use VDC Rep Admin, and we're going to create an agreement from New York to SFO.
But wait, I thought we decided that we didn't want to create extra agreements.
In this case, because we have a nice linear topology, all right, we're creating a ring to help with the data paths. Because right now, as you can see, SFO can't replicate anything to NYC and vice versa. So to mitigate that, we're going to go ahead and create this ring, right? Another agreement, simple agreement, linear, to mitigate.
Okay, but what if we add an additional site? Is that, do we continue to have sort of this mess even with the ring?
So let's add another site here. And we're going to pick, let's say, Orlando. And as we add this, let's go ahead and add multiple VCs here as well. Now, to do this and not have downtime, the best thing to do is we're going to go ahead and create another one first. Okay? Then we're going to go back and we're going to clean up this guy here.
Just use VDC Rep Admin to remove the old ring.
Exactly.
And we'll have and you've
create the
already
new one.
built the new ring
Right.
to replace it.
And then we can go back and say, you know, show us the agreements, and now we should see that there is bidirectional between these two, these two, these two, and then SFO and MCO.
Yeah, so basically to sum that up, we're with this nice linear topology, we're able to mitigate sort of the man-in-the-middle failure by just having one single additional replication partnership instead of
this
spaghetti mess.
Right, and it's nice, linear, very simple deployment model.
And easy to expand and maybe even contract if you had to.
Right. Okay, so let's take this a step further and let's talk about the topology in regards to, you know, how we can solve this type of scenario. Because right now, this vCenter server, he can't do anything, right? We can't repoint him across sites because in 6.5 we don't support repointing across sites. So right now, we cannot manage this vCenter server.
Right, when its PSC is down.
Right, because we can't authenticate. So in essence, okay, workloads are still doing their thing, but from a management perspective, we can't log in, we can't do anything, any changes, all that stuff. So how do we get to a point where we can do that?
Well, can we put more than one PSC in a site?
We can put as many as we want in a site as long as we adhere by the maximums in 6.5, which are 10. And again, in 6.5 update 1, PSC number doesn't change. It's 10 as well. It's only the VC number that changes.
Okay.
So I think we should draw out another one, but showing now what would happen if we had multiple PSCs within each site. So let's start here.
So maybe we can just replicate what we have up top, down below.
Sure.
So you can start out with San Francisco.
So here we go, PSC, and I'm going to put SFO here, and then I'm going to basically draw this, and that represents that they are in a site.
Okay, so we've got two PSCs within the San Francisco site.
Right.
What does it look like when we deploy a vCenter?
Well, why don't you go ahead and deploy the two vCenters that you had in San Francisco. Okay. I'll let you pick how you want them to be represented.
Okay, well, so the first one is easy, right? I'll just pick the first PSC. But when I deploy the second one, I have a choice, right? I deploy it to the first one or to the second one. Is there a right answer?
No, there's no right answer. It's whatever you want.
All right.
I think one thing you have to keep in mind is the relationship between PSC and VC. When it comes to vCenter, vCenter can only point to one platform services controller at a time. When it comes to the PSC, it is a one-to-many relationship. It can manage up to the maximum, which again in 6.5 is how many VCs?
10.
Okay, and in 6.5 update 1, we're increasing, so
15 out of the box, and then there's a configuration change you can make to get up to 20.
Right. So that's something you have to keep in mind, because a common question is, okay, well, how many PSCs should I deploy in my environment to manage X amount of VCs? And that all really depends on how much failure you can withstand.
Yep.
So again, let's move on and let's add our next site. I'm going to draw a few more boxes here.
So when you deploy your PSCs to, let's say this is going to be the Indy site again, right? I've noticed that you're replicating your first Indy PSC back to the second PSC. That's because we're trying to avoid this, right? We're doing this linear topology, right?
Exactly, right? We want to make sure that it's nice and linear, and at the same time, we want to avoid any kind of split brain or isolation. So now we have, again, Indy is deployed. We have, the opportunity. We only have one VC. Which one should I deploy to? Or does it even matter?
It shouldn't matter.
Okay.
So you can pick whichever PSC you like.
All right. So I'm going to deploy it to this one. Okay. Now, what if I want to add another site?
Well, it should just be a rinse and repeat of the Indy site.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and do NYC. We're going to have another one in NYC. And we're going to draw our...
Now, as you're deploying NYC, the question that pops into my head is, do you have to deploy the same number of PSCs in each site? Because you have up to this point. That's
a good question. And the answer is no. It's all about what I can withstand when it comes to a failure. So if you look at the example we had up here, I mean, we certainly did not want to have this failure, but we did. And because of that, we now can't manage this. So depending on your SLA and what you can withstand in regards to a failure, maybe in SFO, we can't withstand a failure, right? Indy, we can't. But if New York, we can, then you can just deploy one and have the vCenter pointing to it. And then later on, you can always add another PSC if you need to.
Okay. So then are we also going to do the ring in this scenario as well?
Yeah. So we've got our third site all deployed. The final step is creating that replication agreement. And now we are within a nice linear topology. And if for some reason, let's say we have a data path loss here or data path loss here, we are in good shape and we can mitigate that. And then when we look back at the failure here that we had, so if we come here, let's say to Indy, and this PSC goes down, what can we do?
Again, I don't know why that would happen in Indianapolis.
Well, I know the admin there. What can we do to fix that? Because before we couldn't repoint across site. But to fix this now, we can actually repoint because we are within our site. And now vCenter can authenticate and we can manage it until we can fix this PSC. If we cannot fix this PSC via troubleshooting, then what we wind up doing, since again, back to the multi-master, same data is being replicated, is we decommission it, we delete it from inventory, and then we deploy a new one.
Oh, well, that sounds fantastic because from my experience as an admin, it was usually a pretty big pain or a big to-do to try to get a restore completed. Multiple tickets involved, multiple teams involved. It took a while to bring that VM from backup and actually perform the restore. It'd be great if we could just delete it and just deploy a fresh one.
Right, and with the PSC being multi-master, that's perfect. The only caveat to that is if you've lost all these PSCs. Then you would just restore any one of them, and then the next step is to start deploying the additional ones, and they'll start receiving the information from the first initial deployed PSC, and then you're going to run the vCenter server restore script on any vCenter that was pointing to a PSC.
Okay, that makes sense. Maybe we can provide a link to that documentation down at the bottom of the screen so it makes it easy to find.
Of course.
Now, you mentioned the repoint when we have a failure. I'm just curious. I thought there was a familiar command that we used in order to perform that repoint.
Yeah. So as we mentioned earlier in another video, we can use the CM SSO util, right?
Changed mine.
Yes,
SSO. Okay.
exactly.
Right.
There you go.
I'm learning.
And we can repoint from this PSC to this PSC. No issues, right? Because before we were going from embedded to external, so we were doing a reconfiguration. But if we just want to change what PSC the vCenter is pointing to, it's just a simple repoint.
That sounds fantastic.
With that, I think we've covered all the topics that we had in this video.
Yeah, and I think in the next video we're going to cover some high availability. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.
Thanks.